Ephesians 5. The title of this session is The Good Husband, and I had hoped I'd have, somebody here I could use as an example, but evidently they all went to Will's session. I'm not sure what the deal is, all right? We're going to deal with 5 things about being a good husband, and you remember the story, my father used to tell this all the time, of the old country preacher who, whenever he preached, put his hand like this, like a gun, when he was preaching at people. And one day he was asked, why don't you just have open hands or even point? He said, well, I do it like this because every time I point my finger at you, I'm pointing my thumb at myself. He said, this here message is for both of us. So that would be true this morning, wouldn't it, on the good husband? This is not, I know you thought that they asked me to deal with this so that I could tell you how I do it, but that was a joke, gentlemen. That's not the idea at all. We'll see some Bible principles. Let's have prayer and we'll start. Father, help us, I pray, this morning. May this time be profitable to us. May we see what you have said in order that we can implement it in our lives and live it, I pray. We ask these things in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen. There is no challenge that I've ever faced in my life that is greater or for which I feel more unprepared than being a husband and a father. It's quite a challenge, is it not? And while it is a blessed opportunity, it is nonetheless something that to all of us would be somewhat frightening. So the Bible has instructions and help for us in this matter of being a husband, and we see a lot of truth in Ephesians 5. That's mainly where we're going to be this morning. I have a friend, he pastors out in Flagstaff, Arizona, and he was here at the ranch for some time, Randy Miller, and he has on many occasions told me, I have a Bible, he says, that almost automatically opens to Ephesians 5, and it is worn on the pages of Ephesians 5, because when he was here at the ranch, he heard so much from that passage, which is understandable. So let's look at Ephesians 5. Number 1, and I hate to do this. I hate to make number 1, love your wife, because it seems almost trite, almost as if, well, you'd have to start there. But really you do have to, because the Bible does. So let's look at Ephesians 5 and look, if you would, at verse 25. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. Look at verse 28. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. Verses 29 and 31. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. Verse 31, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. Okay, number 1, love your wife. I think it really is a help if we define love. So it's often confusing when we are told to love something or somebody. We can use that word in a sentence about many different people or many different things. So what does it mean to be in love? What does it mean to love your wife? One of the best definitions is in Romans 13. So let me get you to turn there with me if you would. Romans chapter 13. I learned this from evangelist Jack Mount. He was a great help to me. Look down at verse 8. Owe no man anything but to love one another. For he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. Now, the definition is actually in this verse, but it's more clear in verse 10. For this, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. And if there be any commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor, therefore love is. Now let me just stop right here. Think of this as love is colon, because here you're going to have your definition. Love is, you see back down in verse 10, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. Now in verse 8, the apostle by inspiration says, owe no man anything but to love one another. And then he lists several of the 10 commandments. If you love, you're not going to kill or steal or defraud. You wouldn't commit adultery. You wouldn't do these things. Then in verse 10 he says, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. Love is doing right. Love is doing what's right. Now you can apply that to different people. For example, Dr. Riley is here. By the way, wasn't that good this morning? Brother Riley is here this week, and I love Ron Riley. That doesn't surprise you, does it? All right. You think it's all right for me to love Ron Riley? All right. I love Ron Riley. Okay. My wife is in Northern Virginia. Her birthday was yesterday, and she went up to see Wendy, our daughter, and Lee, our son-in-law, and 2 of the kids that are still at home. She went to see them and spend a couple of days, and she flies back in the morning. I take Brother Riley to the airport, and I trade him for Mary. Good trade. All right. So I see her tomorrow. Now, I love Mary. Does that make sense to you? You think that's good? All right. I love Brother Riley. I love Mary. I hold hands with Mary. Are you getting a little nervous here? All right. I love Mary. I hold hands with Mary. I love Brother Riley. I do not hold hands with Brother Riley. In fact, even when we shake hands, it's brief. I do not love Brother Riley in such a way that I would hold his hands. Now, why do I hold hands with Mary? And the answer is because I love her. Does that make sense? All right. Why do I not hold hands with Brother Riley? Because I love him. Doing right by Mary expresses itself differently than doing right by Brother Riley. Now think of how this has been so confused and so messed up and so ill-used in our day and time. I lived through the 60s. How many of you people were alive in the 60s? Okay. Remember in the 60s, free love was the big deal. Do you remember this? All right. And so the deal was, if you loved someone of the opposite gender, you moved in with them. And somebody would say, well, what about marriage? And they would say, marriage? What is marriage? It's a piece of paper. It means nothing. I love her. And so you move. And the mantra was, if you're not with the one you love the one you're with. That was what was said in the 60s. Well, you can imagine my incredulity. Isn't that a good word? What does it mean? I don't know, but it sounds good, so I'm using it. My incredulity when in the 2000s, early or late 90s, the same gender marriage movement was on. Remember that? Okay, so you got 2 ladies, you got 2 men, they want to get married. Well, I was watching the news, which I never do. By the way, this is true. I have not seen a major newscast in 25, 30 years. I don't watch the news. You say, why not? Because I like being happy. Why would I watch the news? All right. You say, well, don't you want to know what's going on? I can find out what's going on without watching the news. All right. But I was watching the news, and they were interviewing this couple. They happened to be female, this female couple that was in line, I think it was in California, where else, to get a marriage license. And so the interviewer was interviewing one of the ladies. I think it was the husband lady. I'm not sure, but I think it was the husband lady. So he was interviewing one of the ladies, and you want to get a marriage license? Yes. And you want to get married? Yes. Why do you want to get married? And the answer was, because we are in love. Well, I'm sorry, I just had to chuckle because I could remember 30 years before people saying, we're in love, we don't have to get married. Now they're saying, we have to get married because we're in love. In both cases, the reason for the marriage or the lack of marriage had very little, if anything, to do with the word love. Because in both cases, people would have acted differently if they were genuinely in love by a Bible definition. Love is doing what's right. So if I love my wife, I do right by her. And obviously, as already illustrated, doing right by Mary is different than doing right by Brother Riley. So there are things I would do with or for Mary that I wouldn't necessarily do with or for Brother Riley. Now, I ought to be kind to Brother Riley. I ought to be giving to Brother Riley. These things are all true. I ought to be kind to my wife. I ought to be giving to my wife. This is all true. But marriage is a specific and special relationship. I only have it with one person, and I only need it with one person, and I am to love that person. So I need to work at doing right by my wife. Now somebody says, well, what about emotion? What about feeling the love? You know, this is the wonderful thing. When the Bible says, husbands, love your wives, it's obviously a command. It's not easy to turn emotions on and off, but you can choose to do what's right. So if you are commanded to love your wife and you do, trust me, the emotion will follow. You know, emotion's a wonderful caboose. It's a terrible steam engine, but it's a wonderful caboose. So if you love your wife, the enjoyment of love will follow, but the main thing is doing right by her. Now, I don't mean this to be at all improper, but we're adults here, so let's act like it here for a second. Did you love your wife before you married her? Okay. Do you love your wife after you marry her? Yes. Before you married your wife, did you sleep together? No. After you married your wife, was the marriage bed acceptable? Well, yes. Okay, well, what's the difference? Doing right. Marriage. See, the difference is doing right. So do right by your wife. Number one, love your wife. Number two, provide leadership. Look down at, the preceding verses. In fact, let's read 2 or 3. 22, verse 22. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. He's the Savior of the body. Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Now, leadership is a matter of position. You know this, but let's just review it. You don't lead in your home because you're wiser, you may be. Because you're better looking, you probably are not. Because you're more powerful, you well may be. Because you're more experienced, because you're more godly. That's not the reason the man is to lead in the home. The man is to lead in the home because that's the way God made it. So your position is as a leader. Show leadership. I'll never forget this. Several years ago, I was with a pastor, and he said, we have a couple of wives in our church that would give their left arm if their husband would lead, but he won't, and so they have to. Now, we can argue as to whether or not they have to, what that means later. The point is your wife ever put in a position where she has to take leadership because you won't or you don't? See, we talk a lot about the husband is the head of the home. Well, he is, so live like it. In other words, provide leadership. And I think a good way to do this is to start with just little dinky things. I think it's fine to say to your wife, where would you like to eat tonight? I'm taking you out. I think that's fine. But you I'm not trying to be cute here. You will find out that the decision process goes a lot more quickly if you're involved in it. This is interesting. Mary and I, of course, eat out a lot because we have to, because we travel. We eat a lot at Cracker Barrel. Well, recently, we have this deal on our phone where we can tell where Will is when he travels. You have this? And they can see where we are. So Will wrote us, we were at Cracker Barrel, and he said, you and Dad are at Cracker Barrel. And I've been to that very Cracker Barrel. He knew where it was. You're at Cracker Barrel. We were 300 miles away. Mary said, yes, how did you know? And he said, and you're having chicken strips, and Dad is having beans and greens. Well, Mary looked down at the table, and she was having chicken strips, and I was having beans and greens. And so we were just amazed. She wrote Will back and said, what you know is just amazing. Well, he knew it because 98% of the time we go to Cracker Barrel, unless it's for breakfast, Mary gets the chicken strip, whatever the deal is called, and I get beans and greens. Okay, well, that's true. So I walk into Cracker Barrel. When I walk in the front door, I know what I want. It's not always beans and greens, but it usually is. But whatever it's going to be, I've been to Cracker Barrel before. I know exactly what I want. All right, but we sit down. Mary reads the menu. Now, she's going to get chicken strips. I know that. But she reads the menu, and she reads all of the menu. And so the waitress says, you ready to order now? Yes, I'm ready to order now. No, Mary says, it'll be just a couple of minutes while she reads the menu. Now, why does she read the menu? I don't know why she reads the menu. I'm just telling you she does. And then after she reads the menu, she says, I want chicken strips. And that's not what they call it, but at any rate, I want the chicken strips and I want them grilled, not fried. And I say, I want beans and greens and I want unsweetened iced tea. And the lady goes to get it. The point is, we could have been in and out before we ordered if I had done the ordering. All right, now does this mean I should always order at Cracker Barrel? No, I shouldn't, but there shouldn't be legitimate trauma in your marriage because you don't make a decision. Cracker Barrel is just a fun thing. That's okay. But the deal is you ought to provide leadership, and I would work at providing leadership in things that are unimportant. I have a good friend who's with the Lord now. His name was Don Tyler. He pastored in Brownsburg, Indiana, and Mary and I were there, I think, 3 or 4 times for revivals. And his wife has written a couple of books on the back table, and we see her every year in Florida. She's a dear lady. He was the personification of leadership. Again, you go out to a restaurant, Brother Bill, you sit here, Mary, you sit here, and I'll sit here, and my wife will sit there. He just always, he never took anything for granted. If there were 10 people, he still chose places to sit. And Mrs. Tyler, she said it took her a while after he went on home to glory to find out where she should sit when she went in a restaurant, because he was such a great leader. Well, now, I chuckle at his leadership, but that's one of the things God used in his building a church that ran 1,700 in the country in Brownsburg, Indiana, a suburb of Indianapolis. So leadership, provide leadership to your wife. I think it's great to have discussions and to get ideas and to ask what she thinks. But in the final analysis, give her the comfort of saying, we should, whatever. By the way, can I just add this in? It's good for your kids, too. I don't think it's always a good thing to say to your children, what do you think? They've got parents, and depending upon their age, they may not be accomplished thinkers anyway. I think that starts in life at about the age 30. So somewhere along there is when people begin thinking. So the deal is, it's all right to provide leadership for your kids. So number 2, leadership. Number 3, this is interesting to me. Love her family. If you can get this one, you're going to be Mr. Super Husband when you get home. Love her family. Look down at verse 31. For this cause, that would be marriage, shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. Okay, now what's the Bible talking about when it says, at marriage, a man shall leave father and mother? And by the way, why doesn't the woman leave father and mother? I mean, wouldn't she? Why doesn't the Bible say, and you wives leave father and mother, be joined to your husbands, and you two should be one flesh? This is not the only time the Bible says this. By the way, it starts in Genesis chapter 2. You're aware of that. Man will leave his wife, or will leave his father and mother. He's going to cleave to his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. So what's it talking about? Well, it's talking about coming out from under the authority. At marriage, you started a new family. So your dad and your mom no longer run your family. This really is important. And they no longer run your family because you have a new one. Now, you still love your dad and mom, right? And you still have a relationship with your dad and mom, and you should, but the relationship is not the same. I don't mind any time Will says to me, Dad, what do you think? I think that's fine. But by the same token, Mary nor I ever call Will up in the morning and say, did you brush your teeth? See, I'm not supposed to take care of Will's brushing his teeth. Cena takes care of that now. Mary and I did that for many years. Now it's Cena's responsibility. So that at marriage, he leaves father and mother. Now, she does too. Now the reason it doesn't say at marriage shall a woman leave her father and mother is because the authority resides in the person of the husband. So if you got a new home, it's because of the husband. Are you following this? So he leaves dad and mom, he's joined to this wife, and they two are one flesh. And so while dad and mom may give advice or suggestions or maybe ask, or that's all fine, but they don't still lead the home. Will has been directing the ranch now. He's close to the end of his 17th year. That's hard to believe. He's been running the ranch 17 years. About 10 years ago, we had a brochure for West Branch that had a picture of a horse on the front that was ugly because it had a big head. The horse, if you know anything about horses, it was an ugly horse head. So I said to Dale Stover, who was working here at the time, I said, the picture of the horse head for the brochure, I just saw it. I said, the thing is ugly. It's got to be changed. It's got to be changed. Nothing happened. I went back into the office where they do all the layouts and all the work via computer to all the stuff that we print. And I said to the young lady there, this horse that we have on the West Branch brochure is pathetic. It needs to be changed. It's terrible. I said, my dad would be embarrassed. It needs to be changed. Nothing happened. A week later, I was in Will's office. I said, Will, this horse that we have for the West Branch brochure, my dad is turning over in his grave to have this represent the Bill Rice Ranch, the West Branch. And Will looked at me and said, I know you've been talking to all the wrong people. So evidently I had talked to Dale Stover and he'd said to Will, and Will said, fine, leave it alone. He'll come and see me. And I talked to the lady out back there setting up stuff, and she'd gotten in touch with Will, and he said, fine, he'll come and see me. And so the deal was I walked into Will's office and he said, you've been talking to all the wrong people. You know, I learned something that day. I learned that the Bill Rice Ranch was truly the Will Rice Ranch at that point, and that I had a different relationship with my son. That's not improper, is it? Okay, so I actually work for Will. Did you know this? I actually work for Will. And I'm paid very poorly, but I do work. I work for Will. My pastor is 30 years, well, no, not quite. Yeah, 30 years my junior. Pastor Richard Coyle, he's here this week. I've known Brother Coyle since he was a teenager. I knew Brother Coyle when he was a college student. I knew Brother Coyle when he worked at the ranch as a college-age counselor. I knew him when he first started traveling in evangelism. His name is Richard Coyle, but I never call him that. I call him Pastor or Pastor Coyle, occasionally Brother Coyle. Now, I don't think it'd be the end of the world if I called him Richard. I'm 76, he's 46, does that sound right? He's 46, 47, something like that. And so there's a great difference in our age. Yeah, that may be true, but he's still my pastor. So I need to have a relationship that is proper with my pastor. And you need to have a relationship that's proper with your wife, which means you're the head of the home and she's in your home. She's not in dad and mom's anymore. Okay, having said that, that's not a reason for any of you to diss. You get the lingo there? Am I cool or what? That gives us no reason to diss your parents or hers. With all of our mother-in-law jokes, my dad used to say, it's unwise to tell mother-in-law jokes in your church because a third of the people hearing you tell the jokes are mother-in-laws. Now, if your mother-in-law has a joke and she tells you and you repeat it saying, she told me this, that's probably fine. But I'd be careful about the mother-in-law jokes. I can't think of a person I would be more different than Mary's mother. Now, Mary's mother's with the Lord in heaven, as is her father, as are my parents. But I'm quite a bit different than Mary's mother. Actually, Mary's different than her mother in many, many ways, but she's similar in many ways. Mary's attractiveness comes because of her mom, and Mary's home instincts, cooking, kids, all that stuff come from her mom. All right, now I didn't marry Mary's mother, but I did marry Mary's mother's daughter. And much of what Mary is because of Mrs. Bingham. Now, I was never drawn to Mrs. Bingham emotionally at all, but she's still Mary's mother. I should love Mary's mother, don't you think? I should love her dad. And it's been a help in our family because my kids love their grandparents. Now stop and think of this. Not only did I face Ephesians 5:31, for this cause a man leaves father and mother, he's joined to his wife, but my kids are going to face the same thing. I want my kids to go out from the family and provide their own families and have leadership. I want that. But I don't want to be out of a relationship with my daughters or my son. That makes sense, doesn't it? So, love her family. Okay, well, what if some of the people in her family are not that lovable? Well, she loves them, doesn't she? And you should too. So, I know you've heard this before, but the love of Christ in us, shed abroad in our hearts, is a love that loves because it loves, not because someone else is lovable. How lovable were you and I when Christ showed his love to us? Number 4, protect. I love this, verse 29. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourishes up, and cherisheth. The word cherish here is very similar to the word nourish, but they're different. The word cherish is brood like a mother hen would protect or take care of her chicks. No man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth, feeds, and cherisheth, protects, cares for it, even as the Lord, the church. Just like I'm commanded to love Mary as Christ loved me, so I'm commanded to care for Mary as Christ cares for me. Protect your wife. Protect your wife. I'll never forget this. Years ago, Mary and I were in a home for a meal. Doesn't happen much anymore, but we were in a home for a meal in a revival. And the husband, pastor, his wife, Mary, and I, this husband and his wife were all sitting at the table. And the husband said to me, to everybody listening, I'm glad y'all are here. I never get a good meal unless we have company. Well, he may have meant that to be humorous, but it was more stupid than anything. Even if it's true, it was stupid. By the way, if it's true, it says something about his leadership, does it not? Even if it was true, it was harmful and hurtful. He should be protecting his wife, not making fun of her. Now, I love humor. And Mary says to me, you know, Bill, not everybody knows you. And I enjoy teasing people that I don't know. For example, I've done this now for the last year and a half. A waitress at a restaurant, you can tell we eat out a lot, can't you? A waitress at a restaurant brings me the ticket, and I always say, oh, we have to pay for this. And she says, well, yes, it would be nice if you did, so you didn't have to go to jail or something like that. And then I say, well, do I have to leave a tip? And she always says something like this, well, whatever you think, but it would be nice. And so then I say, well, I was thinking about leaving 35 cents. Do you think that would be all right? Well, of course, they always have to say, whatever you can sleep with is fine. Well, I can sleep with 35 cents wonderfully. That's not a problem at all. So I usually say that. Well, Mary says, Bill, they don't know if you're joking or not. Well, I am joking, except about the tip. I wasn't joking about that, but the rest of it, I'm joking. So I think it's fine to have fun, and it is true that there are people that don't respond to humor the way I do, and so I say things and they don't quite pick up on it. We have a guy here on the ranch, and I've had to learn not to be funny around him because he's a great guy and very serious-minded. And so I'm neither great nor serious-minded, but I have to work at that. Well, be careful with your humor about your wife. Enjoy things, but be careful. It's a lot easier in our family to laugh at me, that is for me and Mary and our children, than it is to make fun of my wife. Your wife needs to be protected. Think of all the things a wife is responsible for. Think of Titus. The older women are to teach the younger women to love their husbands. Well, don't you think you could have part in that too? Don't you think you could teach your wife to love you, encourage your wife? Don't you think you could maybe be more lovable? My father went to be with the Lord in 1978, and about a month before my dad died, I purchased a necklace. I found it in it would have been a catalog, I guess. I don't remember where I got it. You didn't get things online then, but it was a necklace that had Mary's name, Mary. Except I think I had Pal. At any rate, I got it for Mary, and my father saw that and he liked it. And so he ordered one for the princess. That's what he called mother, the princess. So he ordered a princess necklace for mother. Well, my father passed away, and about a week after Dad died, maybe less than that, in the mail came this necklace from her husband, who was now in heaven. And mother, a month or so later, was telling that story to a group of ladies, and she said, how could you help but love a man like that? Well, what did Dad do? Bought a necklace. And the response of his sweet, dear wife, the princess, was, how could you help but love a man like that? So the question would be, what have we as husbands done in the last month about which someone would say, how could anyone help but love a husband like that? Protect your wife. Take care of your wife. Protect her. Number 5, put her first. Put your wife first. Okay, now I think you know what it means to put somebody first, but let me not take it for granted. In Ephesians 5, the Bible deals with husbands and wives. In Ephesians 6, the Bible deals with parents and children, and then masters and servants. In Ephesians 5, it starts with the wife, interestingly enough, being subject to her husband, and then the husband and loving his wife. And then in Ephesians 6, it starts with the children obeying their dad, and then dad being the right kind of father, not provoking his children to wrath. That order shows us that there's great power in being in submission. So before the Bible says to wives, be sure that you are in submission to your husband, it says to the couple, submitting yourselves one to another. So a husband should be an example of submission to his wife by deferring and putting her first. Let me tell you something else. Kids are important. They're very, very important. I know that. I'm sure you know that. Well, I'm certain we all know that. Kids are important, but they come after the marriage and they leave before the marriage is over, all things being equal. You know, anecdotally, I don't know if this is true scientifically. I've not seen any, quote, studies on this, but it seems to me that a lot of marriages dissolve after the kids are gone. You know, you'd think if you make it through the first 26 years and you raise kids and go through all that in school and all that business, you'd think after that's over you could just enjoy each other and be in the sweet spot of married life. But evidently that's not true. And what that shows us is that a lot of marriages are held together because of family, because of kids. So as long as mom has the kids to work with, and as long as dad has the kids to love and admire, then they're okay in the marriage. But when the kids are gone, the marriage is gone because dad and mom scarcely know each other. Now, I may be exaggerating, but probably not as much as I'd like to think I am. Sometimes in the day-to-day responsibility of a family, the last person in your life should be the first, and that's your wife. You take care of your kids, you pay for your kids, you have a house for your kids. There was a time when you wanted a car when you were first married, when you wanted a home for your wife when you were first married, but all of that changed when you had kids, and so now everything's about the kids. You're involved in the kids, she's involved in the kids, and then 22, 24, 26 years later, the kids are all gone and you're not involved in each other. Now look, you love your kids, that's fine. You spend time with your kids, that's fine. You enjoy your kids, that's fine, but you're not married to any of them. You're married to your wife. And so you need to put your wife first. And you can just do that in attitude. Just putting your wife first. In other words, deferring to your kids before deferring to your wife says something that's not healthy. Now, you love your kids. I understand that. You're all for your kids. I understand that. She's all for your kids. Together, you're for your kids. But don't forget each other. Just enjoy your marriage. I've often said, I got this from my dad. My dad used to say you have to spank your kids, you have to discipline your kids, you have to train your kids. All this is work. Have fun with your kids. He was a big on just having fun with your kids. Do things that your kids like. Well, I think that's important. I think you should take your kids and get them ice cream. And I think you should ride bikes with your kids, and I think you should hike with your kids, and I think you should go see your kids in the school play or playing basketball or whatever. Even if you're bored to tears, I think you should be involved in your kids. But do not allow involvement with your children or your church or your work or your job or anything else come between you and the responsibility you have with your wife. Enjoy your wife. Just enjoy your wife. What does she like doing, and what do you like doing, and what do you like doing together, and what are your interests? If you can't answer those questions, get to work on it. See, so that marriage is not just parenting, and it's not just a job, and it's not just responsibilities, but it's, let me use the word, it's kind of cheap, it's fun. Yeah. See, it's just fun. Now, I'm not an example. I'm not intending to be, but let me give you an example of Mary in this. Okay, Mary's birthday was yesterday. So she thought, should I go see Wendy and Lee and get the presents I'll get there, or should I stay home with Bill and get the presents I'd get here? And she opted to go be with Wendy and Lee, which I think makes sense. So I said to her earlier in the week, hey, I'm going to take you to supper tonight, and we'll go buy Kohl's. We both like Kohl's. And see what we can get. She said, I want to go to Steinmart too. I don't like Steinmart, but she does. Okay. So we went to Steinmart. We found nothing. We went to Kohl's. We found nothing. We went out and had supper. That was a good deal. We enjoyed that. And he came back home. She said, I'm going to be gone this week. She said, next week, you're going to be speaking in Atlanta. Why don't we go a day early and go to Helen, Georgia? Anybody here know where Helen, Georgia? It's in the Georgia mountains, and it's a big spot, especially for anybody from Florida, because it's cool. So she said, let's go to Helen, Georgia. So we're going a day early, even though I'm speaking in Canton. We're going and taking the trailer just to spend some time in Helen. Now, it's not a big deal, except it is a big deal. And it's fun. And it's good. Think of all the things you've done for your kids that you did not enjoy. When I was about 30 years ago, we took our kids to Disney World in Florida. And after we were there, I said to Mary, will you tell me that I never have to come back to this place again so long as I shall live? I don't see any sense in Disney World. I appreciate the business part of Disney World, but standing in lines is not my thing, and especially when it's 105 degrees in the shade and muggy in Florida. So I didn't go to Disney World for many years until we took our granddaughters. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful to take our granddaughters to Disney World. They went to meet the princesses. Have you ever done this? It's just precious, guys, really. It's really, really precious. So you go in, and here are these college girls that are dressed up like Snow White or whoever. And, they're not real people. But, I was impressed with it. And when I left, I walked up to one of the princesses, and I said, thank you. Now, I knew she wasn't a princess, or I thought she wasn't, but my granddaughters didn't know that. And it was just wonderful. My granddaughters were only, one was 22 and one was 18. But they were, they were just little kids. The point is, I don't like Disney World naturally, but I enjoyed it for the sake of my grandkids. Okay, what do you not like, but you could enjoy for the sake of your sweet wife? She married you. And so put her first. 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 First.